Hello, and welcome to Shakespeare in Context with Claire. This is just a short video to tell you about my presentations. If you like Shakespeare and want to know a little bit more about the plays, if you're going to see a production and you want some background, if you want to know more about the author, the sources he used, and the times in which he lived, this channel is for you. It is designed with newcomers to Shakespeare in mind. If you have studied Shakespeare for years, you might find a new perspective. As a newcomer myself, I don't claim to have all the answers or years of experience and knowledge. An open-minded approach and an inquiring mind is all that's required. So let me tell you why I decided to start this YouTube channel. When I first heard that Shakespeare's plays might not be written by Will of Stratford, I was intrigued. It was only around 5 years ago my interest was sparked. I was surprised that I had never heard this before. I thought it was a new thing, not a topic that had been debated for hundreds of years. I found out there are quite a few candidates that have been put forward. Francis Bacon, Christopher Marlowe, Edward de Vere, and a whole host of others, even Queen Elizabeth I herself. I soon learned that Edward de Vere was the leading candidate. This seemed plausible, but surely there must be evidence that Will of Stratford was the author. So I started looking at the evidence. I got into a discussion with a Stratfordian. A Stratfordian is someone who believes that Will of Stratford wrote the works. A non-Stratfordian doubts the traditional attribution. At this point, I was trying to find answers. The Stratfordian who I was questioning hid behind a pseudonym. He was quite knowledgeable and provided me with various arguments to prove his point. I really did want to believe that Will of Stratford wrote the works, but not willing to take anything at face value, I trawled the internet for evidence to these arguments. I started to learn more about the contemporaries of Shakespeare and Shakespeare's world. I soon discovered that when I looked at anything connected to Shakespeare, it only took a couple of clicks before Edward de Vere's name would crop up. He was everywhere. For example, the first works to be published with the name Shakespeare, Venus and Adonis, and The Rape of Lucrece, were dedicated to Henry Wriothesley. A quick look on Wikipedia tells you that he was a ward of William Cecil, and therefore grew up in the same house that Edward de Vere grew up in, as a ward of the Cecils, and that there were negotiations for him to marry Edward's daughter, Elizabeth de Vere. But alas, it wasn't to be. The close link between the Earl of Southampton and the de Vere family is shown in this print of him, with Edward's son and heir, Henry de Vere, 18th Earl of Oxford. There is no evidence that Will of Stratford ever met the Earl of Southampton, who has long been thought to be the fair youth referred to in Shakespeare's sonnets. Shakespeare's comedies, histories and tragedies were dedicated to the Earls of Pembroke and Montgomery. These two noblemen were proposed as suitors for Edward's younger daughters, Bridget de Vere and Susan de Vere. In fact, Susan de Vere married the Earl of Montgomery, and they had many children together. If you look at Shakespeare's sources and influences, Edward de Vere's name pops up time and time again. Who translated the works of Shakespeare's favourite Latin author Ovid? Edward de Vere's uncle, Arthur Golding. Who pioneered the English sonnet, often referred to as the Shakespearean sonnet? Edward de Vere's uncle, Henry Howard. Who is thought to be the main writer of the original Sir Thomas More manuscript, said to have had a page written by Shakespeare? Edward de Vere's secretary, Anthony Munday. Who donated said manuscript to the British Library? A descendant of Edward de Vere. I could go on giving examples like this, but we haven't got all day. There are so many pieces of evidence like this that on their own they don't amount to much. But when I added it all together, I became convinced. And I haven't even mentioned his contemporaries who praised him for his writing. When I speak to people about the Shakespeare authorship mystery, I find it impossible to sum up all the evidence in a concise, convincing way. I wondered, how can I present these not only hundreds, but thousands of little clues that Edward de Vere wrote the works? I thought that in every play in the first folio there are clues to Oxford's authorship. I also felt that it helps our understanding of the plays if we put them in the correct context. So here we are. Shakespeare's plays in context. The real context. I'm not trying to make up a narrative that fits preconceived ideas of who the author was. I'm new to this. I'm not an English literature graduate. Prior to 2018, I had seen a few Shakespeare plays, but I had no particular interest in Shakespeare. Since finding out that there is a mystery surrounding the authorship, I'm driven by a quest to find out more. I only use sources that are freely available on the internet. It is the type of research that anyone can do. I try to use a wide range of resources and report on the evidence that I find without relying too much on Oxfordian literature. These are just some of the resources that I use. Try it yourself. Find a play and have a good look at it. When might it have been written, if you take into account the current events of the time? Who was it written for? Does it suggest an educated audience, like law students, or a noble audience, like the court of Queen Elizabeth, or the groundlings at the Globe? Can you find any double meanings, or even multiple meanings? What was Shakespeare really saying? Do the plays contain a message, political or spiritual? Can you find a theme that runs through the play? Have a look at original manuscripts of source material. What do the title pages and dedications tell you? I can guarantee that if you ask open questions like these without searching too hard, you will find that Oxford's name crops up time and time again, even if you are not looking for it. Or you could do the opposite and try and find links between the works of Will of Stratford. This is a much more difficult task that has been attempted by scholars for years, but they have had to resort to filling in the gaps with imaginings and suppositions. If all this seems like too much hard work, please sit back and enjoy my presentations. They are not intended to be a complete analysis of each play, but a small insight into some of the literature, events and places that may have influenced the author. I provide links to my sources, so I would encourage you not to take my word for it, but to have a look at what other people are saying. I would be happy to hear your suggestions for future presentations and comments on any of the plays that I have tackled so far, even if you disagree with me. But remember, please be kind.